Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Q&A webinar, Overcoming Barriers to AI Adoption in the Workplace, presented by our head of AI from Educate 360 at Aadhar Garg. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with all of you in an email after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. I will now hand it over to you, Adhar.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Tiffany?
Hi, yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Textor. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Educate 360 and very excited today to welcome everyone to dive into a hot topic, which is why are companies struggling to adopt and embrace AI? And so excited to have Aadhar, as we said, our head of AI, who's been helping companies large and small, and in this new landscape of AI. And we first want to make sure that this is going to be conversational. So please, as Mariella said, drop your questions. We will start off just with some common barriers and challenges that we see, whether it's a small company to the largest company. If you're here today because you're having challenges, know that you are not alone. So before we kick it off, Mariella, if you want to drop a poll, we want to ask you, what do you think the biggest barrier is to adopting AI in your company, to make sure that we're addressing some of those concerns and challenges? So while everyone's answering that poll, Aadhar, why don't you, what do you say to someone who thinks that they're behind the game, or they haven't caught up, they're behind the times?
Yeah, so I would say that, this is still the kind of the early innings of the game. So it's never been easier to get involved and get started. And now is the time, right? So I've been in the space since back when it was actually really tough to get involved and get started with AI. So my journey started in the labs of Georgia Tech. It involved like writing algorithms for computer vision in Java and in C++, right? From there, the AI kind of evolved into more of a statistical paradigm where you almost needed a PhD to start to build out some of these algorithms, right? That ended up driving things like weather forecasts, more accurate predictions of the path to take around traffic in your navigation applications, product recommendations for Amazon and Netflix and Spotify, right? Like, what are you most likely to enjoy listening to next? Once upon a time, I used to make like playlists, and now I just go to like the Spotify auto-generated playlist, right? So these things came a long way in kind of the era of traditional AI. And then kind of, I would say now we're in the era of generative AI, which is something that started on the technology side by a major paper that Google released in 2018, and that the world really saw the possibilities of with ChatGPT in late 2022, right? For me, as a practitioner in AI over this whatever 15-year period it's been, that was just such a remarkable moment because people that had never cared about AI in my life started to ask me questions about it, started to engage in the topic, right? My wife is a high school teacher. And so one of her first questions was like, oh, wow, like, how do I respond to this technology being available to every student to whom I assign a paper, right? Like what do I do now? I was like, I don't know, like go ask the math teachers how they handle calculators, right? Like at some point you have to teach the concept, but then this is a tool. Let's use it, right? Let's teach our kids how to use it so that we can just be more productive as we use these more productive tools. So all of that to say that it's never been easier, right? Like now you can engage with the chatbots really easily. The consumer grade tools around ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, right? Like you have lots of options to use these tools. So just get started.
That's great. So let's look at the poll. It looks like there's everyone's the same challenges that we've seen: lack of skills, because, well, it's brand new, so of course everyone lacks skills. Resistance to change, integration with existing systems, which is something we see a lot as well. Whether you have the data or the cloud to support it, those are big concerns, as well as security. If you give people access, what are they going to be looking up? How are you locking it down? As well as what are they uploading right now to the open AI tools like ChatGPT? And then executive alignment and support. That is definitely something that we see as well. As you really need stakeholders and leadership. It's a team sport. So one of the things I would say, how you mentioned ChatGPT and OpenAI. So if someone's just getting started, where would you tell them to begin? Is that the best entry point, the gateway to sort of understanding AI?
Yeah, so I would say that, there are two different types of personas that are essentially engaging with AI for the first time, right? There are some folks that are doing it to play around with the technology and just kind of understand what it's capable of. And for those folks, I would say, okay, like, yeah, go play around with some of those consumer grade AI tools like ChatGPT, like Gemini, right? So I just wanted to see if I could get Gemini to create a flowchart for me, right? I went out there and I was like, okay, create a flowchart of the automotive industry. Now, maybe I'll use that professionally at some point, maybe I won't, right? But like for me, this was just me kicking the tires, and I did it using a consumer grade technology. Um, Now, I also have needs where like I have to respond to some detailed questions, right? And combing through internal documents would take a long time to respond to those questions. I would love it if I had, an intern that was essentially free, available to me on demand, right? To go do a first pass of that answer. Um, in those instances, I use a tool like Copilot, right? So Copilot is enterprise grade, it's secure, it's connected already to my OneDrive, to my Word documents, to my PowerPoints, to my Teams histories, right?
This
Um,
is Microsoft Copilot.
Microsoft Copilot, that's right. And so it's all kind of linked in to my Microsoft 365 and everything I do there. And so like it can help me bring together some of those things in a more enterprise context. Um, we saw that security and concerns about security are a big barrier to adoption. um, it becomes really important for organizations to give kind of approved ways of doing those things to their people, right? Um, the worst thing one can do is to not have a policy, because then people kind of go do what they think is right without necessarily understanding all of the consequences of that tactical decision on the ground, right? Now, you can't have a policy that takes tools and capabilities away from people. So then you have to have an answer for the approved way of using those capabilities, right, within the construct of your organization. Um, and in our organization, I think, we're looking at tools like Microsoft Copilot to bridge some of those individual productivity gaps as just like early starting points. Uh,
Right. So I did that. You actually perfect segue into the next poll, which is, are you currently using these in your organization? And then we'll start to talk about, whether you're using out of box solutions like ChatGPT. So Marielle, if you want to drop that poll of what people are currently using, and then sort of going forward into, okay, once you get familiar with those kind of tools, then how do you have different solutions, and how do you, start to integrate them at a more advanced level. But it's interesting that you mentioned Microsoft Copilot, because I can't tell you how many times I wanted to upload a spreadsheet into ChatGPT and say, okay, can you summarize this or make a pivot table or tell me the trends from this? But I know that there's client information, customer information that I don't necessarily want to put out into the public. And so while I'm really familiar with that, now I can use Copilot and it's locked down. Sensitive client information isn't going into the world. But it looks like there are a lot of people using Copilot. That's great. ChatGPT, less Perplexity, Claude, Google Gemini. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you guys for letting us know what kind of tools you're using. But to expand on that, once you get past the out of the box solutions, what about developing more AI solutions to help you with business problems, with business goals? How do you even define where to start? Like how do you define even a business objective for what you're going to build or how you're going to include AI?
Yeah, so like the tools like Copilot are intended for individual users to get, productive. And so a lot comes out of the box to kind of build traction with those tools. ChatGPT, same story, right? Like designed to just like kind of work as an interface for the types of tasks that it's intended for. As we start to get into, so enterprise security drives us a little away from the consumer tools that are out there, right? And to try to drive towards enterprise grade tools that are available. Um, Copilot is an amazing tool for some of the use cases that we were just discussing, right? But it also does have its limitations. And in my experience, a lot of those limitations have to do with its understanding or lack thereof of how work happens at that enterprise, right?
Mm,
That
okay.
understanding may be in a different system of record. It may be in a CRM or an ERP that isn't connected to that Copilot instance, right? So how do you start to then responsibly and in a measured way, in a risk averse way, give access to the AI to that information, right? That starts to look and feel a lot like a team sport. So on the technology side, you have your usual kind of IT architects, security folks, programmers and application developers, and those types of personas coming to the data, architects, right? Those types of personas coming to the table. And then on the business side, you have to have a sense of the problem that you're trying to solve, right? If you say, I just want to connect my CRM and my ERP, that's a that could be a project that's this big, right? Or it could be a project that's this big. And so how do we define what the actual scope of that project is? How do we start to understand what the value of doing
Mm,
this would be, right? And what could we frame it in the way that like this is the investment that's needed, but we extract a bunch of value from that investment so that the technology team doesn't come back with a budget for this, right? And we know that the value is in here somewhere, right? How do we get efficient with this? Well, that is in defining the business problem clearly, right? And so there are a lot of leadership skills that go into that, defining and articulating clear requirements that go into that, right? Design thinking,
mm,
and leveraging some of the tools that we have as an industry to help arrive at cross-functional clarity on what to build, right? So
and
one of the things that we've done internally,
I was about to ask, I was about
yeah,
to say, like, internally, you've built some AI for us. And so maybe you can talk about that as an example and all of the different people that collaborated on that one AI thing that was created.
yeah. So the tool that we've built is a sales support tool. So it's intended for our internal employees, as they are representing a very broad catalog of courses, right? So Educate 360, um, several brands coming together to ultimately drive excellence in leadership, in process, and in technology across a digital transformation, right? A catalog of thousands of courses, that sellers like need to have a general understanding of in every customer conversation. So we wanted to build a tool that understood the depth of knowledge across those thousands of courses, but could also kind of provide on the fly kind of guidance and recommendations of which course might fit a particular situation. Um, and so we worked across the company, right? So we brought together our content development teams, our partnerships teams, our sales team, who's actually going to be using the tool. On the technology side, all of the different stakeholders that I described were assembled at the table, right? And we started to stage out the data sets that we're going to ingest into our AI platform. We started to figure out, okay, if those are the data sets that we need, then here are the technical components that we need to stitch together. And here's how they need to be stitched together, right? Um, Generative AI is such a fast moving space that like we started with one algorithmic approach or one kind of framework, and agents became really big while we were in the middle of building out generation one. And so like we finished building generation one, we've just launched Gen 1, and we're already working on Gen 2, right? Like that launch will be coming imminently. That will start to incorporate some of these agentic frameworks. Um, and so like to do that effectively, right, we have to move in a more agile posture than we ever have before. We have to be one team across the business where like it's really clear to the AI side what the business is looking for, right? Like what does good look like? And then we can try to out deliver on that. So I've had the pleasure of doing these rollout calls of that tool with our sales team over the past couple of days. And I mean, like people are trying things with it that, you
Mm-hmm.
know, on my test script, but they're also very happy with the results that they're getting back, right? Um, I'm hearing things like, oh yeah, this doesn't fully do what I need to do, but it makes me so much more effective. And it takes away some of the more tedious elements of what I had to do before. It lets me focus more on building a client relationship, on giving good advice, on doing the appropriate research and pulling in the right subject matter experts. So overall, right, like we've tried to build that tool in a way that it delivers that value.
Yeah, and I think that what's really interesting about that is that it's a goal, a goal of our company is to deliver excellent service to our customers and as well as, helping you at wherever you are with whatever course you need. And so it's impossible for one person to know 5,000 courses. So creating that database and being able to talk to that chat, while you're having a conversation with a customer and say, oh, I heard you say this, and here's what I'm, finding. So it's been really helpful, but also, I know I've come to you and said, hey, Adar, I put something in here and I got a really weird response and I don't think it's always giving accurate information. So, how do you deal with that when you build something, small pilot, clear ROI, clear, value to a goal that you want to accomplish as an organization, and then someone sort of raises their hand and says, ooh, I don't know, I don't think it's working. What do you do then?
Well, so first, you know, the person raising their hand and saying, "Hey, I don't think this is working," means that you've done a lot right up until that point, right? You've created a culture where that person feels comfortable raising their hand and saying, "Hey, this doesn't look right." um, you involve the right people in your testing process to make sure that the thing actually does what you need it to and not just what the engineer heard the requirement to be, right? So just getting to that point means that you've done a lot of things well, right? Um, the other thing, so okay, we ran into that issue, right? Um, Now, the approach that I chose to take as the leader in this equation was to get to the root cause of the problem. So, okay, well, did the large language model create a bad answer, or was it working off of incorrect information? Oh, it was working off of outdated information. Okay, well, where was it getting that outdated information? Is there a process, you know, is there a process discontinuity somewhere that's leading to that outdated information still being there? How do we fix that process discontinuity, right? Like that trail involved touching several lines of business in our company. It involved touching, several technology teams in our company. But we got to the root cause, and we are working on fixing the root cause. Now, sometimes those root causes take time to fix because the implications go across all of those teams that are around that table, right? Now, okay, so I just admitted we haven't fixed the root cause. However, we've rolled out the tool, right? So, like, yeah, we rolled out the tool, but we're transparent with everyone that we roll it out to. Hey, your judgment is what ultimately drives your success as a professional. Think of this as a tool. Understand that sometimes it will be wrong, right? And
And
I point to that example in our onboarding calls, a specific one, Tiffany, right?
right. Yeah.
Because this is
Transparent.
where it's wrong. And like, here's how I know it's wrong, guys, right?
Mhm.
So when you get responses like this, look a little deeper, right? These things don't line up with your understanding of our business. So then look a little deeper before just trusting the machine blindly. That's a culture change for some of our users, right? We're used to the technology being the source of truth.
Mhm.
Well, now we're working with technology that's a little bit AI in its name. The technical term is AI is a stochastic technology. It's not deterministic, right? And so that means that it doesn't follow very prescribed deterministic rules that are guaranteed to always be right or wrong, right? And tested against all of that logic. It is a stochastic technology. It is trying to generate an answer to what you are asking it, right? And so that's the magic of it, is that it can do things that I didn't specifically program it to do. The risk of it is that some of those things that it does might be wrong. So the mental framing that I always try to give everybody is, this is a really sharp senior in high school that you have the privilege of having as an intern, right? Very eager to answer every question, sometimes needs pointers to the right information so that they can learn where to learn the answer,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes needs some of those things, but like in general, just like if you can learn how to work with it and it can learn how to work with you can have a really good, productive, mutually beneficial working relationship with this tool.
Mhm. And I think that two takeaways from that are one, progress over perfection right now, and there is the fail fast mentality. Like start small, get something out, learn from it, and continue to adapt and innovate. And then the second takeaway is, how do you get people to implement and use it? Because if you're going to invest the time and the energy and you create this really great AI tool and then a single salesperson used it, that is a culture shift too, where you really have to encourage and getting that stakeholder buy-in and getting leadership and getting, like you said, it's a team sport in order to get everyone involved. I did want to open it up to some of the questions that we have. We've got some really good questions. One of the questions is, does the internal tool that we created, we meaning you, created, allow users to grade a response with a thumbs up or thumbs down?
It does, in fact, yeah. So, and due credit to the team, I am merely one representative of the team. There is a team that created the tool that we are all privileged to use. So due credit to them. Um, we do have a feedback mechanism. It is a thumbs up, thumbs down mechanism. We see on average, so far, we see about 10% of the people give it a feedback thumbs up, thumbs down. And then I think anywhere, depending on the day, anywhere from 60 to 80% are thumbs ups, and then the balance are thumbs downs. Um, the way that we use that feedback is really it's a logging mechanism. My team reviews the logs on a daily basis. Um, the thumbs downs are ways that we look at the thumbs downs and we say, okay, like let's look at the logs. Let's start to understand, does this feel like the right answer to us? If we can tell why it's the wrong answer, the wrong course was recommended, the price point doesn't make sense for the course and the length of the course. Some of those types of things, right? Like we can go chase down and we can start to understand what was driving that mechanism. The thumbs up things are also really important, right? Like we're seeing some really cool emergent behavior when we give the tool access to all of our content in a responsible way, right? In a secure way. But it has access to a bunch of our content. And now seeing it reason through some of that content, right? And start to draw inferences and start to support sellers. We've given it the persona of Eddie, and we're calling it the education engineer, right? So like a sales engineer, but we're not about sales, we're about education. We're Educate 360. So Eddie is our education engineer, and Eddie is starting to reason across our content to um, give that extra personalization into everything that we do.
Another question is, what are the top AI tools and what are people using them for? Which I think is, there's for everything you need, for every goal you want to accomplish, for every problem you want to solve, there's an AI tool that is either out of the box or can be customized and built. So how would you answer that?
Yeah. So AI is being talked about as a general purpose technology, right? And that means that like it can be applied in a lot of different ways. Um, so okay, then we start to look at like how we subdivide AI into its categories, right? So earlier in the talk, I was talking about some traditional AI things like forecasting, prediction, recommendations, right? Like there's a whole suite of tools that are available, um, depending on which cloud you're on, right? Like, so if you're on Amazon, for example, SageMaker is like the classic tool that you would use to create those models, to manage and maintain those models, govern them, make sure that they're, available for inferencing, start to identify when they need to be retrained because you're seeing model drift, a whole bunch of these more technical sounding things. There's a toolkit called SageMaker that you would do for those traditional tools. Um, in the generative AI world, right, like there are the large language models themselves. So think like GPT 4.0 on OpenAI, or O1 is another one of their models. Meta is releasing the Llama family. AWS has funded a company called Anthropic that has the Claude family of models, right? These are the companies that are building the underlying like engines of a car, imagine it that way. And then you've got like Microsoft building a car around that engine. So my analogy is often that like, okay, so Microsoft is figuring out how to use that engine inside of its car that is Teams and Outlook and PowerPoint and Excel and Word, right? And so, okay, it's like combustion engines moving to electrical engines. Like we had to think a little differently about what happens where in the car. And we had to accommodate a bigger battery, for example. We didn't have to accommodate a gas tank anymore. Microsoft is going through those machinations to make their products more effective. And then we start to go through those machinations to make our company more effective, right? Especially when it involves going across multiple data sources, going across multiple systems of record. That complexity starts to make us look very unique and very different from the next customer and the next customer, right? So we start needing bespoke solutions.
So I know we have 1 minute left, and we have a bunch more questions. So I'm going to put two things. One, feel free to get in touch with us. Muriel, if you want to drop contact information, you can get in touch with Aadhar. He is here to answer questions. There's no question that is too big or too small. So if your organization is really looking at how to implement AI, please don't hesitate to contact. And then second, I want to drop in the last poll, which is what are your goals? Really wanting to understand like what's next for you and your organization in AI. And I did get one more, well, there's a couple more questions, but one that got a couple of thumbs up is how can you use AI in your job if you work at an IT service desk? Any ideas? And is that an individual discussion, or is that really an organizational discussion? We had another one about compliance, and how do you deal with getting non-compliant answers in a mortgage company? And so, like, what level is the individual usage versus organizational usage?
Yeah, so I think that uh, if you're dealing with company data, company systems, the answer probably involves your company's IT team to help you chart the right path and make sure that that data is being protected adequately. Um, and often those decisions start to look like organizational decisions. For example, in like how we want to do to leverage the tool. Um, Folks like ServiceNow are embedding AI into their toolkit, right? So like, if you're a ServiceNow shop, do you use that? Is it good enough to solve the problems that you're looking to solve? Do you need to supplement it somehow? How do you do that, right? Like, it starts to open up that whole train of thought. Um, if you're not a ServiceNow shop, okay, what tools do we use? What are we comfortable sharing with some AI, right? Like, how do we make sure that the right guardrails are around it? Um, and we start to kind of solution that way.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We're 2 minutes over. I feel like, Adar, you and I could talk about this for hours. I mean, we do talk about it for hours. And for the PDU questions, we will be emailing everyone the link to this webinar afterwards. So check your email, and then we'll also have contact information for Adar in there too for you guys to get in touch with us. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Adar, thank you so much for answering these questions. I think we're going to have to make this a regular thing because it has been really informative and enjoyable. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.